That night, the biggest storm in 20 years crashed down over the Cascade Mountains in Washington state. Rain hammered the earth as if the sky had split open. Thunder and lightning kept tearing through the pitch-black heavens, and the power went out across the entire region within the first few minutes. In the middle of nature's fury, a small cabin sat swallowed by a pine forest, the firelight from its hearth flickering through the window like a solitary lamp in an ocean of darkness. Wren Calloway huddled in an old armchair, both hands wrapped tight around a cup of tea that had gone cold, her eyes fixed on the flames, while her mind drifted somewhere far away. She was 27, once an emergency room nurse, at a major hospital in Seattle, once accustomed to blood, to grief, to that fragile line between life and death. But 18 months ago, she'd left it all behind and fled to this cabin, the one her adoptive father had left her before he was gone for good. Since then, Wren had lived alone, secluded in the mountains, keeping her distance from the outside world, as if that world had betrayed her. A roll of thunder shook the cabin itself, but Wren didn't move. She was used to storms. They were the only visitors who came to her with any regularity anymore. Then, beneath the wind's howl and the rain lashing the roof, she heard something else. Not the crack of a falling tree, not the cry of a wild animal. It was a human sound, a weak, broken moan, as if someone were trying to beg for help with their last breath. Wren shot to her feet, her heart picking up speed. She listened hard, fighting to separate that sound from the roar of the storm. Another moan came, clearer this time, closer. Without hesitation, she threw on her raincoat, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. Cold wind slapped her face again and again. Rain blurred her vision, but Wren kept moving. The instincts of a nurse wouldn't let her sit still when someone needed help. She found him about 100 meters from the cabin, face down beside the trail. Half his body sunk into a puddle of muddy water. His head was slick with blood, a severe wound at his temple still seeping, mixing with the rain into dark red streams that ran down into the ground. Nearby, Wren saw the traces of a vehicle that had gone over the edge, and below, a faint blaze was still burning itself out in the rain. She didn't have time to think. She dropped to her knees, rolled the man onto his back, and checked his pulse. Alive. Weak, but alive. Wren couldn't have said where the strength came from that night. The man was tall, heavy, nearly twice her weight, but she dragged him inch by inch, step by step, through wind and rain, through sucking mud, until the two of them collapsed across the threshold of the cabin. She lifted him onto her adoptive father's old bed, then started doing what she knew best. She cut away his soaked clothing, and that was when she noticed the first thing that didn't fit. This was an expensive suit, the kind of fabric only wealthy people wore. On his wrist was a luxury watch that Wren knew could be worth enough to buy this entire cabin. But what made a chill run through her wasn't the money. It was the scars. Old and new, scattered across his body like a map of a life shaped by violence. This man wasn't ordinary. Wren swallowed hard, but her hands didn't stop. She cleaned the wound, bandaged it carefully, checked his pupils, monitored his breathing. And then, as she used a warm cloth to wipe the blood from his face, the firelight caught the sharp angles of his features, and she realized, all at once, that he was handsome in a way that felt dangerous. Just then, his eyes opened. Wren held her breath and waited, but those eyes, though open, were completely empty. They stared straight at her, yet they didn't see her. They were like two bottomless depths, reflecting no firelight, searching for nothing, recognizing nothing at all. Wren moved her hand back and forth in front of him. No reaction. She clicked on the flashlight and shone it directly into his eyes. His pupils didn't constrict. Her chest went heavy as she understood the truth. He was blind. This stranger, with his expensive suit and a body written over with scars, had lost his sight. Maybe it was from the head trauma. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe it was forever. Wren didn't know. She only knew that tonight, in the biggest storm in 20 years, fate had brought a mysterious man to her door. A man who couldn't see her, who didn't know who she was, and who depended entirely on her to survive. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know what had happened to him. She knew even less that her choice to save him tonight would change her life forever. But that was the story of the days to come. For now, Wren only sat there, watching the stranger with eyes that were open but saw nothing. And for the first time in 18 months, she felt like she wasn't alone anymore. If this story touched your heart, please tap like to support us. Don't forget to share it with the people you love so they can listen too. And if you want to follow Wren's journey with this mysterious man, Subscribe to the channel now so you won't miss the next parts. The next morning, the storm had eased, but it left behind a world in disarray. Wren woke from the armchair where she'd kept watch all night, her neck aching, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. She looked out the window. The trail that led down the mountain was now nothing but a river of red mud. Fallen trees blocked the way in every direction, and the phone signal was still completely gone. They were cut off, at least for the next few days. Wren turned back to the man on the bed. He still lay motionless, breathing evenly, his face pale beneath the white bandage wrapped around his head. She was about to make coffee when, all at once, he jolted upright. Too fast, too sudden. He flailed in the air, lost his balance, and hit the floor with a heavy thud. Wren rushed to him, but before she could reach him, a shout tore through the room. "Where am I? Is anyone there? I can't see anything." His voice was raw with panic, his eyes wide open but utterly vacant, his hands clawing at the air as if trying to grab hold of something that wasn't there. "Why can't I see? What's happening?" Wren dropped to her knees beside him and set a hand on his shoulder, but he jerked and curled in on himself like an animal trapped in a corner. "Stay calm," she said, gentle, but steady enough to cut through his fear. "You're safe. You're in my cabin. I found you out in the storm last night." He stopped, struggling. His breathing was still fast, but her voice seemed to be the only anchor holding him to the world. "Who are you?" he asked, his throat rough. "I'm Wren Calloway. You were in a car accident. Your vehicle went off the cliff and burned out. You had a head injury, and I think that's why you can't see." Silence. He sat there with his back against the bed, his eyes still open, staring into nothing. Then he lifted a hand, pressed it to his head, and a low, pained sound slipped from his throat. "I don't remember anything," he whispered. "I try to remember, but there's only pain. Pain like someone swinging a hammer into my skull." Wren watched him, something tightening inside her. "Do you remember your name?" He was quiet for a long time, his brow drawn tight with effort. Then, as if from some distant place in his mind, a single word rose to the surface. "Finn," he said, uncertain. "I think my name is Finn." "Finn," Wren repeated. "All right, Finn. Do you remember anything else? Family? Home? Anything?" He shook his head, misery plain on his face. "Nothing. Just darkness. And that name." Wren helped him back into bed, pulled the blanket up over him, then brought him water and a painkiller. While Finn rested, she went outside and checked the old phone again. No signal, but she'd managed to look at the news before the storm arrived. There were no reports of a missing person that matched his description. No car accident had been recorded on this mountain road. It was as if Finn didn't exist. "Isn't anyone looking for me?" Finn asked when she returned, as if he could hear the thoughts she hadn't spoken. Wren hesitated. "I can't reach anyone yet. The road is damaged, and there's no signal. But when things settle down, I'll find a way." She didn't tell him that nobody had reported him missing. Not yet. That afternoon, while Finn slept, Wren washed his clothes, and that was when she found it. In the pocket of his suit jacket, a silver ring lay neatly in her palm. She lifted it into the light and saw the engraving, a wolf howling, rendered in such detail she could almost count the strands of fur, the curve of the moon behind it carved with the same careful precision. This wasn't ordinary jewelry. This was something that carried meaning, history, a story. Wren stared at the ring for a long time, then placed it inside the wooden box on the shelf where she kept her adoptive father's keepsakes. She'd ask him about it later. When he was stronger, when he remembered something, night fell, and Wren kept watch by the bed the way she had the night before. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting dancing ribbons of light along the walls. Finn slept, but his sleep wasn't peaceful. He tossed and turned, sweat beading on his forehead, his lips moving around words that never fully formed. Then, suddenly, his hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. Wren startled, but she didn't pull away. She looked at his face, twisted in the grip of a nightmare, and she heard his voice, broken and urgent, as if he were trying to warn someone from deep inside his own mind. "Don't trust him. Don't trust him." Then he sank deeper into sleep, but his fingers still held her wrist. Wren sat there, perfectly still, watching the stranger's face in the flickering firelight. Who was he talking about? Who was the man he was warning her not to trust? And who had done this to him? The questions spun through her head like last night's storm, but there were no answers. Only darkness, and a man whose eyes could see nothing, and that haunting whisper echoing through a small cabin hidden among the pines. 2 weeks had passed since that fateful stormy night. The road down the mountain had been cleared. The phone signal had returned, and Wren could have taken Finn to a hospital without any trouble. But she didn't. He had no identification, no health insurance, and strangest of all, there was still no missing person report for a man who matched his description. No family searching, no friends worrying, no coworkers asking questions, as if Finn were a ghost, belonging nowhere, with no one waiting for him. It was so unnatural that it kept Wren on edge. She decided to wait a little longer, to let him recover, to give memory a chance to return, and only then figure out the next step. And in that waiting, she taught him how to live in the dark. It started with the simplest things: 12 steps from the bed to the table, 8 steps to the bathroom, 23 steps to the front door. Wren stayed beside Finn, counting each step out loud as he felt his way through the cabin, hands lifted in front of him like a child learning to walk. She taught him to use sound to find his bearings. The crackle of the fire was the living room. The soft run of water was the kitchen. The wind whistling through the seams of the door was north. She taught him to feel objects with his hands before using them, to touch the rim of a mug before pouring water, to brush the side of a chair before sitting down. The first days were clumsy. Finn spilled coffee across the table because he couldn't tell the cup was already full. He slammed into a door, cursed under his breath, then let out a bitter laugh. He reached for a plate and knocked over a glass of water instead, and the sound of shattering glass left him frozen in the middle of the room, his face caught somewhere between anger and helplessness. But Wren didn't pity him. She understood that the last thing a man like Finn needed was pity. Instead, she stayed patient. She coached him, and sometimes she took his hand to guide him. In those moments, their hands lingered together longer than they needed to, and they both pretended they didn't notice. Even with his memory gone, Finn's nature still showed itself in the smallest things. He was proud to the point of stubbornness, always trying to do everything himself even when he knew he'd fail. He had a strange protective instinct, always asking Wren if she was safe before he fell asleep, always trying to place himself between her and the door whenever he heard an unfamiliar sound, even though he couldn't see a thing. And he had a dry sense of humor, the kind that belonged to people who'd grown used to meeting adversity head-on. "At least I don't have to look at my face in the mirror every morning," he said once, and Wren didn't know whether she should laugh or cry. Then, one evening, when they were sitting by the fire after dinner, Finn asked a question that caught Wren off guard. "What do you look like?" Wren went quiet. She didn't know how to answer. She'd never thought of herself as anything special, never taken pride in her appearance, and describing herself to someone who couldn't see made her feel oddly awkward. "I don't know how to say it," she admitted. Finn was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, hesitant. "Can I touch your face, so I can see you in my own way?" Wren's heart beat faster. She knew she should refuse. This was a line that shouldn't be crossed between the one who saved and the one who was saved. But instead, she heard her own voice. "Okay." Finn lifted his hand, searching the air until his fingertips found her cheek. Wren held her breath. His fingers were warm and rough, moving slowly, carefully, across the shape of her face, her forehead, her brows. Wren closed her eyes when his touch reached her eyelids, light as a butterfly. Then her nose, her lips, the curve of her chin. He stopped, and for an instant, neither of them breathed. "You're very beautiful," Finn whispered, his voice so low and sincere it felt as if someone had reached straight into the center of her chest. Wren couldn't speak. She only sat there in the flickering firelight with the warmth of a stranger's touch still lingering on her skin. That night, Wren lay in the armchair, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She thought of 18 months of loneliness. She thought of a cabin as silent as a grave. She thought of long days with no one to talk to, no one to wait for, no reason to get up each morning. And now there was a man here, a man she knew nothing about, a man who could be anyone, a man marked by scars and haunted whispers in his nightmares. She was beginning to get used to his presence, used to the cautious sound of his footsteps in the cabin, used to the steady warmth of his voice asking if she needed help, used to the feeling of not being alone, and that scared her. Because Wren knew better than most that the things we grow used to are the very things that can hurt us the most when we lose them. A month had passed since that stormy night. Finn's sight still hadn't shown any real sign of improvement. His world was still only shapeless, smears of dim light. But he'd learned to move through the cabin with a skill that was almost startling. He no longer bumped into doors, no longer spilled coffee, no longer needed Wren to guide him step by step. His feet had memorized every floorboard, every corner of wall, every measured distance. The small cabin had become his world, and within that world, he no longer felt lost. That evening, they sat by the fireplace as they always did. Autumn had arrived, the air had turned sharper, and the fire had become the center of every night inside the cabin. Wren was reading, while Finn sat in silence, his head tilted toward the crackling flames as if he were listening to something far away. Then he asked, suddenly, "How long have you lived here alone?" Wren looked up, caught off guard by the question. Over the past month, they'd talked about many things. About the weather, about the books she read aloud to him, about the meals she cooked, but Finn had never once asked about her past, and she'd never offered it. 18 months, she answered, her voice softer than she meant it to be. Finn stayed quiet, waiting, and that quiet felt like an invitation. Wren stared into the fire, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself open. She told him about a childhood with no mother and no father, about the years spent growing up in shelters, being moved from one place to another like an unwanted object. She told him what it felt like to always be an outsider, always a guest in someone else's life, never belonging anywhere. Then she told him about Thomas, a 50-year-old social worker who met her when she was 16 and standing at the edge of giving up on everything. He wasn't rich, he wasn't young, there was no sensible reason for him to take in a wounded teenager. But he did. He brought her to this cabin, taught her how to cook, taught her how to read, taught her to believe she was worthy of being loved. "You're my daughter," he'd told her. "Not because of blood, but because I chose you." Wren's voice began to tremble as she reached the next part. 18 months ago, Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack. No warning signs, no time to say goodbye. That morning he'd still been drinking coffee by the window, and by the afternoon he was on the floor, eyes closed. His heart stopped. Wren was the one who found him. She was a nurse. She knew what to do. But every piece of knowledge, every practiced skill turned meaningless when the person lying there was her father. After the funeral, she quit her job in Seattle and ran back here. "I didn't know what I was living for anymore," Wren said, her voice reduced to a whisper. "He was the only family I had, the only person in this world who truly wanted me to exist. And when he was gone, it felt like I disappeared with him." Silence filled the room. Only the soft crackle of the fire and the breathing of two people remained. Finn couldn't see Wren, but he could hear her. He could hear the pain inside every word, hear the loneliness stretched across 18 months, hear a heart breaking in slow, secret pieces. "I don't remember my past," Finn said, his voice low and unhurried. "I don't know who I am, where I came from, whether anyone's waiting for me. But I do know one thing for sure." He paused, as if weighing every word. "Wherever I come from, there's definitely no one like you. No one willing to run into a storm to save a stranger. No one patient enough to teach a blind man how to count his steps. No one who cooks porridge in the middle of the night because she hears me cough. Whoever I was before, I'm sure I didn't deserve what you've done." That was when Wren broke. Tears spilled out beyond her control, sobs trapped in her throat that she'd held back for 18 months. She tried to turn away, tried to hide her wet face, not wanting him to know she was crying. But Finn heard it. He stood, felt his way toward the sound, arms lifted in his own private darkness, until his hands found her shoulder. Then he pulled her into him. Wren went rigid for a heartbeat, and then every wall she'd built collapsed. She cried into his chest, cried for Thomas, cried for 18 months of loneliness, cried for the orphaned girl who'd never belonged anywhere. And Finn only held her tighter, saying nothing, one hand moving gently along her back, as if she were something precious and fragile. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered against her ear. "I'm here." They stayed that way for a long time, beside the fire, in silence. The flames crackled, the wind hissed beyond the window, and two wounded people leaned into each other in the night. For the first time in 18 months, Wren felt like she belonged somewhere, and it was both wonderful and so terrifying it stole her breath. The second month slipped by, and life inside the small cabin slowly settled into a familiar rhythm. Each morning, Wren woke to make coffee, while Finn felt his way out to the porch to sit and listen to the birds. Each afternoon, she read to him by the fireplace. Each night, they ate a simple meal and talked until it was late. Since the night Wren had cried in Finn's arms, something between them had changed. No one said it out loud, but they both could feel it. They weren't the rescuer and the rescued anymore. They were two lonely people leaning on each other in a world that was far too wide. But Finn's past wouldn't stay quiet. It returned in nightmares, like a ghost clawing its way up from a buried part of memory. That night, Wren was sleeping in the armchair when she woke to the sound of ragged breathing. She sat up fast and saw Finn hunched on the bed, drenched in sweat, his chest heaving as if he'd just run a marathon. His eyes were wide in the darkness, terrified, even though they couldn't see a thing. "Finn?" She hurried to his side. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away. His hands were trembling, gripping the edge of the blanket so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His breathing slowly eased, but the fear on his face didn't. "I dreamed something," he finally said, his voice rough. Not a normal dream. It felt like a memory, but broken up, unclear. Wren sat on the edge of the bed and set a steadying hand on his shoulder. "What did you see?" Finn closed his eyes, trying to hold on to pieces that were already slipping away. A large room, very large, blinding light, like crystal chandeliers. There were a lot of people around, but I couldn't see their faces, just shadows. He paused, his brow tightening as if the effort hurt. Then there was laughter. Someone was laughing. Not happy laughter, more like the kind you hear when someone knows they've won. And I felt pain. Right here. He lifted a hand to his chest, where his heart beat beneath his palm. Not physical pain, the feeling of being betrayed, stabbed in the back by someone I trusted. "And then?" Wren asked softly. "Pain, falling, then darkness." Finn opened his eyes and turned toward the sound of her voice. "Wren, I think someone tried to kill me. I can feel it in my bones, but I can't remember who." Wren fought to keep her voice calm, even as her heart began to pound. "It could be nightmares from the head injury. Your brain is healing. Sometimes it makes strange images." Finn shook his head with hard certainty. "No, that feeling was too real. You know, even though I don't remember anything about myself, there's something I'm sure of." He tightened his grip on her hand. Someone I used to trust, did this to me. The car going over the cliff wasn't an accident." Wren didn't know what to say. She only held his hand and stayed beside him in silence. The night was long, and the darkness outside the window suddenly felt more frightening than it ever had. But the next morning, when the first sunlight slipped through the curtains, a small miracle happened. Finn was walking from the bed to the table the way he always did, steady and practiced. When he stopped in the middle of the room, his whole body went still, as if he'd turned to stone. "Wait," he whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. "I see something." Wren was pouring coffee, and the cup slipped from her hand. "What did you say?" "I can see," Finn repeated, blinking again and again. "It's not completely dark anymore. I see light, and shapes, blurry, but real." She rushed to him. Finn turned toward her, squinting as if he were trying to focus a broken camera. "Stand by the window," he said. Wren did, stepping into the frame of the window where the morning light was spilling in. She watched Finn looking in her direction, and for the first time in 2 months, she saw that his eyes were no longer empty. They were searching, trying to see. "I see you," Finn whispered, wonder in his voice. "Just the outline. Your hair, your shoulders, your shape. Like a painting that isn't finished yet, but I see you, Wren." He moved closer, lifting his hand as if he wanted to touch her face, then stopping halfway. "I want to see you," he said, his voice low and aching with need. "Really see you, not only with my fingertips, with these eyes." Wren felt her throat tighten. She should have been happy. Finn was recovering, his sight was returning, and maybe his memory would follow soon. That was good. That was what she'd been waiting for. But deep inside, in the place she didn't dare look at, a fear was growing. When Finn could see clearly, he'd see she was only an ordinary woman, nothing special at all. When Finn remembered his past, he'd remember he belonged to another world, a world where she had no place. When everything returned to what it had been, would he still want to stay in this small cabin? Would he still want to stay with her? Wren smiled at Finn, the brightest smile she could manage. "That's wonderful," she said. "You're getting better." She kept the fear locked inside her chest and didn't speak it aloud. But with every day that passed, as Finn's sight improved by one small degree, that fear grew by one small degree too. Like darkness before dawn, the closer it comes to light, the thicker it gets. The 3rd month passed, and what they felt for each other had crossed a line they both knew was there, a line neither of them dared to name. It lived in accidental touches that lasted too long, in the way Finn looked toward her even though he still couldn't see clearly, in the way Wren realized she was always searching for him the moment she stepped into a room. Then one day, Wren got sick. Her body, already worn thin after too many late nights of worry, finally gave out. She ran a high fever and was confined to bed, her skin burning hot, unable to stand on her own. This time, it was Finn who took care of her. "Just stay still," he said when he heard her trying to sit up. "I'll cook something for you." Wren wanted to argue, but her body wouldn't let her. All she could do was lie there and listen to Finn fumbling in the kitchen, pots bumping into each other, water pouring, and it sounded like more of it was hitting the floor than the pot, a soft curse under his breath. "Turn on the left burner," she said weakly. "The rice is in the third jar from the right." "I know," Finn answered, though it was obvious he didn't. Finn's attempt at making porridge could only be called a disaster. He spilled water onto the floor at least twice. He lightly scorched the bottom of the pot because he forgot to stir. He couldn't find the salt, so the porridge was bland. But in the end, he managed to bring a bowl to Wren's bedside, his expression proud, as if he'd just conquered Mount Everest. "It's not pretty," he admitted, setting the bowl down on the bedside table with careful, searching hands. "But it's edible, I think." Wren looked at the thin porridge, a few grains of rice still whole, and she couldn't help it. She laughed, weak with sickness but honest. The first laugh in a long time that carried no sorrow and no effort. It was simply joy. "Thank you," she said, and the meaning of those two words went far beyond a bowl of porridge. A few days later, when Wren had recovered, a small storm rolled in and cut the power across the region. They sat at the table with only a single candle burning between them. The flame danced, throwing shimmering shadows along the walls, and the cabin sank into a kind of light that felt both warm and mysterious. No one spoke. There was only the steady rain against the window, the wind hissing through the cracks, and the sound of two hearts beating in a small space. Then Wren felt Finn's hand searching across the tabletop, feeling his way. When his fingers found hers, they both went still. Neither of them pulled away. His fingers slowly threaded through hers, squeezing gently as if he were afraid she might disappear. Wren felt her breathing turn heavier, her heart beating faster in her chest. "Wren," Finn said, his voice low and rough in the dark. "What? I don't know who I am." He spoke slowly, as if weighing every word. "I don't know what my past is. I don't know why someone tried to kill me. I don't know whether I was a good man or a bad one in the life I had before I met you." Silence. The candle wavered. "But I do know one thing," Finn went on, his voice steadier now. "I want to be with you. That's the only thing I'm sure of in all this chaos. Whoever I am, whatever my past is, I want to be here, in this cabin, beside you." He leaned toward her, slowly, hesitantly, as if afraid of being refused. Wren looked at his face in the candlelight, the sharp lines of him, the eyes that still couldn't see her clearly but were turned toward her with absolute sincerity. She knew she should stop. She knew this was a dangerous boundary, but her heart was tired of always being on guard, tired of always trying to protect itself. She closed the last inch between them. Their first kiss was gentle as breath, trembling as a butterfly, and so true it made Wren want to cry. His lips were warm, his hands lifted her face as if she were something priceless, and in that moment, every fear dissolved. When they parted, Wren whispered, her voice shaking, "Me too. I want to be with you too, and that scares me." Finn didn't ask why she was afraid. He only pulled her into his arms, holding her close in silence. And they stayed that way until the candle burned down. That night, after Finn had fallen into deep sleep, Wren couldn't settle. She got up, went to the wooden shelf, and opened the box where she kept her adoptive father's keepsakes. The silver ring lay inside, the wolf carved into its surface catching the moonlight. She picked it up and stared for a long time. She'd hidden it for 3 months, never asking Finn, never searching for answers. But now, with her feelings beyond her control, she needed the truth. Who was he? What did this ring mean? What kind of world was waiting for him outside this cabin? Wren tightened her fist around the ring, determination rising inside her. She would find out. Even if the answer shattered everything they'd been building. The next morning, Wren woke with a resolve that had hardened into something clear inside her mind. She looked at Finn, still sleeping deeply, his face peaceful in rest, and her heart gave a sharp little ache. She needed the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. "I need to go down to town to pick up a few things," she told Finn when he woke. "We're running low on food, and I need a couple other things too." Finn nodded, not suspicious at all. "Be careful. The mountain roads are still slick after all that rain." Wren pressed a light kiss to his forehead and went out to the car, the silver ring tucked in her coat pocket like a secret waiting to be decoded. She drove 30 minutes down the mountain, along winding roads that curled through the pine forest, her thoughts refusing to rest. 3 months. 3 months since she'd found him in the storm. 3 months with no one searching. 3 months. And the ring with the wolf was still the only mystery that pointed toward his identity. The small town at the foot of the mountain was as calm as it always was. Wren parked in front of her familiar coffee shop, the only place in the area with reliable Wi-Fi. She ordered a coffee, found the most hidden corner she could, and opened her laptop. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed into the search bar. Seattle family wolf symbol silver ring. The results appeared instantly, and Wren's heart seemed to stop. The first image was a ring identical to the one in her pocket. The same howling wolf, the same moon, the same delicate detail carved into every line. Under the image was a caption. Symbol of the Blackwood family. Wren clicked the link, and a world completely unfamiliar opened in front of her. The Blackwood family. One of the most powerful business families in the Pacific Northwest. They owned a real estate chain stretching from Seattle to Portland, dozens of high-end restaurants, and the 3 largest casinos in Washington state. But that was only the surface. Every article she read hinted at other activities left unnamed, at ties to the underworld, at a shadow empire in the Northwest. The press called them the Dark Family. Wren understood what that meant. Mafia. Her hands shook harder as she typed again. Blackwood missing. The first result was an article from 3 months earlier, exactly when she'd found Finn. The headline read, Finnegan Blackwood, head of the Blackwood family, missing after severe car accident in the Cascade Mountains. Wren kept reading, each line cutting into her like a blade. Finnegan Blackwood, 36, had taken over leadership of the family after his father, Aldrich Blackwood, died 2 years earlier. The night he vanished, his car was found burned out at the bottom of a ravine. No body was recovered, but police concluded no one could have survived an accident like that. His younger brother, Derek Blackwood, had assumed control of the family. And beside the article was a photograph. Wren stared at the face in that image, and it felt as if the world collapsed around her. It was exactly the man in her cabin. The same sharp angles, the same deep-set eyes, the same presence that looked both powerful and dangerous. The only difference was that in the photograph, those eyes were cold and razor-clear, nothing like the gentle eyes that had turned toward her in candlelight the night before. Finn was Finnegan Blackwood. The man she'd saved, the man she'd cared for, the man she'd kissed last night, was a mafia boss. Wren didn't know how long she sat there. The coffee went cold, the laptop screen dimmed and shut off from inactivity, and outside the window, the sun had begun to sink behind the mountains. Her mind spun with 1,000 questions. He was dangerous. His world was dangerous. The scars on his body, the nightmares of betrayal, the whispered warning in the night, don't trust him. All of it made sense now. He lived in a world of violence, of power, of wars that never truly ended. And then she remembered the man who'd held her when she cried. She remembered trembling hands finding her face, whispering that she was beautiful. She remembered a gentle kiss in candlelight, and the confession that she was the only thing he was sure of. Was that man a monster? Or was he just another victim of a world he hadn't chosen? Wren drove back in the sunset, the last light of day staining the mountain road red, her thoughts tangled into knots. She didn't know what to do. Tell him. Hide it forever. Run before it was too late. When she pulled up in front of the cabin, warm light was spilling from the windows. Through the glass, she saw Finn sitting in the armchair, his face angled toward the door as if he could sense she was coming. When he heard the engine shut off, he smiled, a smile she now knew belonged to one of the most powerful men in the underworld. But it was also the smile of the man who'd learned to count his steps inside her cabin, who'd clumsily cooked porridge when she was sick, who'd promised to stay beside her even when he didn't know who he was. Wren closed her fist around the ring and stepped out of the car. She couldn't hide it forever. He deserved to know the truth about himself. And she needed to know, when his memory returned, what kind of man he would become. Wren stepped into the cabin, her heart pounding hard in her chest. Finn was sitting in the armchair, turning toward her when he heard the door open, that familiar smile rising on his lips. "You're back. I missed you." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the table and set the silver ring down right in front of him. The sound of metal against wood rang through the quiet room like an alarm bell. Finn's smile faded. "What is this?" "I found it in the pocket of your suit jacket. Wren said, forcing her voice to stay steady, even as it trembled. The first night, I hid it for 3 months. Finn reached out, feeling across the tabletop until his fingertips touched the ring. He picked it up, and his fingers began to trace the metal, reading every line of the wolf engraved there. The silence stretched. Wren watched Finn's face, saw his brow tighten with concentration, his eyes still blurred but as if they were trying to look into some distant place inside his mind. Then, suddenly, he groaned, a sharp sound of pain as if someone had just driven a knife into his head. The ring slipped from his hand and hit the floor as he clutched his temples with both hands, his body folding in on itself, ragged breaths tearing out of his throat as if he were being strangled. "Finn!" Wren lunged toward him, but he shoved her away, collapsing onto the floor, twisting in pain. And memory came back like a tidal wave. Shards snapped together into a complete picture, flooding his mind at dizzying speed. He was Finnegan Blackwood, the eldest son of Aldrich Blackwood, the head of the most formidable Blackwood empire in the Pacific Northwest. His father had died 2 years ago after a serious illness, and Finn had taken over the family when he was only 34. His mother, Constance Blackwood, had been shattered by her husband's death, but she still stood behind her eldest son. And his younger brother, Derek, had always stayed in the shadows, always second place, always looking at Finn with a gaze Finn had once mistaken for admiration, when it was really jealousy that had been growing for years. Then that fateful night came into focus, clear as a slow-motion film. Derek had called him, his voice urgent, pleading. "Brother, I need to talk to you privately, just the two of us, at Father's old place, up on the mountain." Finn had agreed without suspicion. That was his brother, his own blood, the one he'd protected and loved his whole life. He drove up alone, without bodyguards, without telling anyone, because Derek said it was family. When Finn arrived, darkness was waiting. It wasn't Derek standing there by himself. It was shadows stepping out from shadows, unfamiliar faces, and Derek's eyes watching Finn from the car parked nearby, cold as ice. "I'm sorry," Derek said, but there wasn't a trace of regret in his voice. "But you're destroying everything Father built. You want to go legitimate. You want to change. You don't understand that this is how we live, how we survive." Before Finn could react, they were on him. No guns, no knives. Derek wanted the scene to look like an accident. They beat Finn unconscious, dragged him into his own car, then sent the vehicle over the edge. The only thing that saved Finn's life was the door flying open when the car struck rock, and he was thrown clear before the vehicle exploded. Luck or fate, he didn't know. "My brother," Finn whispered, still on the floor, eyes lifted to the ceiling, but seeing nothing except the darkness of betrayal. "Derek. He tried to kill me so he could take the family." Wren stood there, stepping back until her spine hit the wall. "You're Mafia," she said, her voice shaking. "You're really a Mafia boss." Finn pushed himself upright slowly, his eyes still blurred but angled straight toward her, searching for her outline in his smeared world. "I'm the head of the Blackwood family," he said, his voice low and exhausted. "My family has a history that isn't clean. We control a lot of things, legal and illegal. I'm not a good man by the way ordinary people define it." Heavy silence settled over the room. "But I'm not a monster," Finn continued, his voice turning more urgent. "When I took over, I wanted to change everything. I wanted to bring it all into the legal world, to cut away the dark parts. That's why Derek wanted me gone. He doesn't want change. He wants everything to stay the same, maybe even to grow." He stood, unsteady, and moved toward Wren. She didn't step back again, but she didn't move closer either. "In these past weeks," Finn said, stopping one step away from her, "everything with you, every moment, every word, the kiss last night, it was all real. What I feel for you is real, Wren. I didn't know who I was when I fell in love with you, but that doesn't make it any less true." She looked at him, the man she'd pulled from a storm, the man who'd learned to count his steps inside her cabin, the man who'd held her when she cried, and now she knew he was also the boss of a shadow empire, a world she couldn't even begin to imagine. Wren said nothing. She turned, opened the door, and stepped out into the cold night. She needed air. She needed time. She needed to think about the fact that her heart had fallen for a man she hadn't truly known. That night, Wren didn't sleep. She sat on the cabin porch with her back against a wooden post, eyes lifted to a sky crowded with stars. The mountain cold seeped into her skin, but she didn't bother going in for a coat. The chill outside was nothing compared to the storm raging inside her. Her reason and her heart were fighting, argument slamming into argument like lightning cracking across the night. Reason told her to leave. He was dangerous. He was a mafia boss, the head of a shadow empire she couldn't even begin to imagine. His world was full of violence, full of enemies, full of endless wars for power. If she stepped into that world, it would swallow her whole. She was only a nurse, a small, solitary woman, an orphan living quietly in a cabin hidden in the woods. She didn't belong in his world. But her heart said something else. Her heart reminded her of the man who'd learned to count his steps inside this cabin, the man who'd fumbled through making porridge when she was sick, spilling water onto the floor, yet refusing to quit until he'd done it, the man who'd held her when she cried, whispering that she wasn't alone anymore, the man who'd kissed her by candlelight and told her she was the only thing he was certain of in his blind, uncertain life. That man was also Finnegan Blackwood, the same person. Footsteps behind her made Wren turn her head. Finn was feeling his way out onto the porch, one hand braced on the doorframe, his eyes searching for her in the dark. "Wren," he called softly. "I'm here," she answered, her voice tired. Finn came closer and stopped a few steps away. He didn't try to touch her. He didn't try to pull her into his arms the way he usually did. He only stood there in the moonlight and said, "You have every right to leave. I won't stop you." Silence. "If you want me to go, I'll go," Finn continued, his voice low and sad. "I don't want to drag you into my world. You've suffered enough. You deserve peace. You deserve happiness. You deserve an ordinary life, without having to fear that someone will come looking for you because of me." Wren stood and turned to face him. Moonlight fell across her face, and in that moment, something like a small miracle happened. Finn looked at her, truly looked at her. No longer just blurred smears of light, no longer a vague outline. His sight had almost fully returned, and for the first time in 3 months, he saw Wren with his own eyes. Her brown hair lifted gently in the night wind. Her eyes shone like the stars above, but they were filled with sorrow and a hard-earned strength. Her face was both soft and unbreakable, like a flower growing out of stone. Finn forgot to breathe for a beat. "You're more beautiful than I imagined," he whispered, wonder in his voice. "More beautiful than anything I've ever seen in my life." Wren looked into his eyes, and she knew he was truly seeing her. For the first time, they looked at each other without fingertips, without voice alone, but with sight. And in Finn's gaze, she didn't see a mafia boss. She saw the man she loved. She stepped closer, closing the space between them. "I don't love a mafia boss," she said, her voice steady. "I love the man who learned how to live again in this cabin, the man who cooked porridge for me when I was sick, the man who held me when I cried, the man who said I was his home." She lifted her hand and touched his face. "And I'm choosing to stay. Whoever you are, no matter how dangerous your world is, I choose you." Finn pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as if he were afraid she might vanish. They stood beneath the star-filled sky, 2 hearts beating in the same rhythm, and in that moment, nothing existed but them. No mafia, no past, no uncertain future. Only 2 people who'd found each other in the storm. But deep down, they both knew this peace couldn't last forever. Finn would have to go back. Derek was still sitting on the throne he'd taken with blood. His mother was still grieving, believing her son was dead. And the real storm was still waiting for them ahead. A week passed after the night they stood beneath the stars. 7 short days that Wren tried to hold on to, moment by moment, because she knew they couldn't last. And then that morning came, when Finn sat beside her on the cabin porch, looking out at the pine forest turned gold in the autumn sun, and spoke the words she'd been afraid to hear for so long. "I have to go back." Wren didn't speak. She'd known this day would come. She'd told herself she was ready for it. But when the words finally landed in the air, the pain still tore through her chest as if she'd never prepared at all. "Derek is in control," Finn went on, his voice low and heavy. "I've managed to contact Sully, my right hand. He told me everything. Derek is doing things I can't ignore. He's taking the family deeper into the dark, expanding the operations I tried to cut away. My mother, Constance, is being manipulated. She believes I'm dead, and Derek is using her grief to control everything." He paused and turned to look at Wren. "And the people loyal to me are in danger. Sully says Derek is removing anyone who was close to me, one by one. I can't sit here while they get hurt because of me." Wren swallowed hard. "I understand. But most of all," Finn said, taking her hand and squeezing tight, "if Derek learns you exist, you'll become a target. He'll use you against me. Or worse, He'll erase you the way he tried to erase me. I can't let that happen. Then I'll come with you, Wren said, forcing steadiness into her voice. I'm not afraid. Finn shook his head. Not yet. That world isn't safe for you. I need to finish this first. I need to know you're here, safe, so I can focus on what has to be done. If I'm worrying about you every second, I won't be able to fight the way I need to. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him she wasn't a child who needed protecting, that she'd survived alone for so long, that she could face anything. But when she looked into Finn's eyes, she understood. He wasn't underestimating her. He was afraid of losing her, and that fear was real. Finn reached into his pocket and took out the silver ring with the wolf engraved on it. The ring that had called his memory back. The ring that marked the Blackwood family. He took Wren's hand, turned her palm upward, and placed the ring there. Keep this, he said. It's my promise. Wren looked down at the ring resting in her hand, silver flashing in the early light. I'll come back, Finn said, his voice firm as an oath. When it's done, I'll come back here. This is my home now. You're my home. Wren closed her fingers around the ring and nodded. She couldn't speak, because she knew if she opened her mouth, she'd cry. Early the next morning, a black SUV waited on the trail at the bottom of the hill. Sully, a tall man with a cold face but loyal eyes, had come to pick Finn up. He stood beside the vehicle, silent, but he nodded to Wren with a respect she didn't understand she'd earned. Finn stood at the cabin door and looked at Wren one last time. His sight had fully returned, and he memorized every line of her face as if carving it into his heart. Then he stepped in, pulled her into his arms, and held her tight as if this might be the last time. Wait for me, he whispered against her ear, then kissed her forehead. A kiss gentle as breath, yet carrying 1,000 promises. Then he let her go, turned, and walked toward the car. He didn't look back, because if he did, he wouldn't be able to leave. Wren stood in the doorway, watching his back grow smaller, watching him climb into the vehicle, watching the black SUV roll away, slowly, then disappear behind the pines. When the car was gone for good, her knees gave out. Wren sank down at the threshold, and tears poured out of her, uncontrollable. She cried, not from loss, the way she'd cried before, not because Thomas was gone, but because she was afraid. For the first time after 18 months of loneliness, she had something to fear losing. She had someone to wait for. And the fear of losing that person hurt more than the loneliness ever had. The cabin's emptiness closed around her. Silence. Hollow space. She was alone again, like 18 months earlier, like her whole life before Finn. But this time, something was different. Wren opened her palm and looked at the silver ring with the wolf resting there. His promise. She pressed it to her chest, and inside the pain, a small spark of hope kept burning. He would come back. He'd promised. The Blackwood estate sat on a hilltop overlooking all of Seattle, grand as a castle planted in the heart of modern America. Tonight, it glittered brighter than ever. Hundreds of crystal chandeliers poured warm gold light into the great hall, where hundreds of guests in elegant evening wear lifted champagne flutes, talked in low, polished tones, and congratulated the new master of the Blackwood Empire. Derek Blackwood stood at the center of it all like a king newly crowned. His black suit was perfectly tailored, his smile confident and charming, and he moved among the guests with the smooth grace of a snake slipping through grass. The allied families were all present, their handshakes firm, their congratulations lavish, their unspoken bargains traded through glances that lingered half a second too long. Beside Derek, Priscilla Montgomery stood like a living statue, icy, beautiful in a deep red gown, the daughter of another powerful family and the future fiancé Derek had arranged for himself. She didn't love Derek, and Derek didn't love her. But this marriage would seal an alliance between two families, and in this world, power mattered more than love. In a corner of the room, Constance Blackwood sat quietly in a red velvet armchair, her sorrowful eyes fixed on nothing at all. She wore black, still in mourning for her eldest son even though more than 3 months had passed. Around her, people celebrated. But for her, this was only another night of grief. Another reminder that Finnegan was gone forever. Derek stepped up to the podium, and the crowd fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice deep and emotional, in a way that had clearly been rehearsed. My brother Finnegan Blackwood was a great man. His passing is a loss nothing can replace. Not a day goes by that I don't think of him, that I don't remember what he taught me. He paused, pretending to be overcome. But the Blackwood family must go on. That's what Finnegan would have wanted. That's our father's legacy. And I promise all of you I'll lead our family into a future more glorious than ever. Please raise your glasses. For Finnegan, and for the future of Blackwood. The crowd lifted their drinks, the clink of glass ringing through the hall. Derek smiled, the smile of a man who'd won, and at that exact moment, the front doors flew open. The sound of iron hinges boomed like thunder in the sudden hush. Every head turned toward the entrance, and for one frozen heartbeat, the air itself seemed to stop. A man stepped inside. Black suit, powerful stride, eyes cold as ice. Finnegan Blackwood. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered across the marble floor. A woman screamed. Constance shot to her feet, hands trembling over her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Finn," she whispered, and then her legs gave out as she fainted from shock and joy too large for her body to hold. People hurried to catch her, to guide her back into the chair, but no one could tear their gaze away from the man walking into the center of the room. Finn moved slowly, each footstep sounding in the dead silence. Sully and a few loyal men followed behind him in a tight formation, their eyes sweeping the crowd with practiced vigilance. Finn stopped in the middle of the great hall, his gaze passing over face after face, until it landed on Derek. Derek went pale for an instant. Only an instant, but Finn saw it. Fear, panic, and the hot flash of anger that a perfect plan had just been broken in two. But Derek wasn't an ordinary man. He recovered quickly, spread a radiant smile, and stepped down from the podium. "Brother," Derek exclaimed, arms opening wide, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "You're alive. My God, we thought we'd lost you." He embraced Finn, clapping his back like a younger brother overwhelmed with joy at being reunited with the one he'd mourned. From the outside, it looked like a touching homecoming, but Finn felt the tension locked into Derek's muscles, heard the quickened breathing Derek tried to control, and when their eyes met over each other's shoulders, Finn saw the truth plain as day. Derek knew Finn knew, and Finn knew Derek knew. "I thought I was lost too," Finn replied, his voice ice cold even as his lips held a smile, but fate had other plans. They separated, and Finn turned to the crowd, offering the kind of smile he'd learned over years of living in this world. "I'm back," he said, his voice carrying through the great hall, "and I'm very glad to be home." The party continued. The music rose again. People returned to their conversations. But the atmosphere had changed. Tension stretched tight as a string about to snap. The two Blackwood brothers stood side by side, smiling and speaking with guests, accepting congratulations for Finn's miraculous return. But underneath it all, they were two wolves facing each other, claws already bared, waiting for the moment to tear the other apart. The hidden war had begun. The days after Finn's return from the dead became days of a quiet war. Finn officially reclaimed his position as head of the Blackwood family, but he didn't expose Derek in public. Not yet. He didn't have enough undeniable proof that Derek had tried to kill him, and in the past 3 months Derek had built a sizable network of loyalty. Many people in the family had grown used to Derek's leadership. Many deals had been signed under Derek's name, and if Finn moved too fast, he could ignite a civil war the family might not survive. So the battle unfolded in the shadows. Finn quietly rebuilt his side, pulling back the old loyalists Derek had pushed to the edges, and gathering evidence of Derek's crimes during Finn's absence. Meanwhile, Derek fought to hold his influence, kept whispering into the ears of allies, and waited for the chance to strike again. The two brothers smiled at each other in public, but behind every smile a knife was already raised. Then a new conflict appeared, from a place Finn hadn't expected. Derek's allies, especially the Montgomery family, began to apply pressure. When Finn had been believed dead, Derek had promised an engagement to Priscilla Montgomery, the daughter of the Montgomery patriarch, to strengthen the alliance between the two families. Now that Finn had returned, the Montgomerys refused to accept the deal being cancelled. They demanded Finn fulfill the promise of marriage in Derek's place, or the alliance would fall apart. Constance, the mother who had just been given back her son after 3 months of grief, supported the marriage as well. She still didn't know the truth about Derek, still believed her younger son had suffered from losing his brother, and she thought a marriage would be good for Finn. "You need someone beside you," she told him in private. "You were gone for 3 months, and I almost lost you forever. Priscilla is the perfect choice. She's intelligent, she's beautiful, and this marriage will strengthen your position within the family." Priscilla Montgomery appeared before Finn one afternoon in the office that had once belonged to his father. She was beautiful in the cold way of ice flowers, long black hair, eyes sharp as knives, a face that betrayed no emotion at all. "I don't love you," Priscilla said plainly, with no detour. "And I'm sure you don't love me either. But this is a good arrangement for both sides. You need the Montgomery alliance to secure your power after 3 months away. I need the position of Mrs. Blackwood to escape my father's control. We can help each other without love." She wasn't cruel. She was practical, a product of the world they'd both been raised in, where love was a luxury and marriage was a business contract. Finn looked at Priscilla, and he thought of Wren. He thought of the small cabin hidden among the pines, the kiss by candlelight, the promise he'd sworn beneath the stars. "There's already someone in my heart," Finn said, his voice unshakable. "I won't marry anyone else." Priscilla lifted an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise crossing the face that was usually so calm and cold. Constance, sitting in the room, sprang to her feet. "Who?" she demanded, shock in her voice. "How do I not know? Where did you meet her? Who is she?" Finn fell silent. He couldn't tell his mother about Wren, not yet. If word spread, Wren would become a target. He needed to keep her safe, at least until he dealt with Derek. But Finn's silence lit another fire. Rumors spread through Seattle's upper circles like a wildfire. The Blackwood boss, newly returned from the dead, had a secret lover. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was he hiding her so carefully? And Derek heard. In his private room, he sat behind his desk, fingers tapping a rhythm on dark oak, and a cold smile slowly grew on his lips. He ordered an investigation, and 3 days later, the report lay on his desk. Wren Calloway, 27, former nurse at a Seattle hospital, currently living alone in a cabin in the Cascade Mountains, 3 hours from the city by car. No family, no relatives, no one to protect her. Derek read the report, studied the distant photograph of Wren taken from afar, and his smile widened. "Interesting," he murmured. "So my brother has a weakness after all." At the Blackwood estate, Finn didn't know he'd just put Wren in the crosshairs. He didn't know that by refusing Priscilla, he'd accidentally shown Derek the path to the woman he loved. And the real storm was about to break over a small cabin hidden among the pines. 2 weeks had passed since Finn left, and Wren tried to live each day the way she had before she ever met him. She woke up, made coffee, did chores around the cabin, read, and went to bed. But everything was different. The cabin now felt so empty it stole her breath, and every corner carried a memory of him. From the armchair where he used to sit, to the bed where he'd spent those first weeks, to the table where they'd shared so many meals in a warm, quiet peace. The silver ring with the wolf stayed in her coat pocket, a steady reminder that he would come back, that she hadn't only dreamed him. That afternoon, Wren was chopping wood in the yard. Autumn had slid into winter. The air was colder with every passing day, and she needed enough firewood stored for the months ahead. The axe rose and fell in a steady rhythm, sweat dampening her shirt even in the cold, and her mind was somewhere far away, somewhere with a grand estate and a man fighting to make his way back to her. She didn't hear the vehicle until it was already parked in front of the cabin. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that never belonged on this lonely trail. Wren froze, tightening her grip on the axe handle, watching as 2 men stepped out. They wore black suits and sunglasses. Even though the afternoon was fading, their faces carved from stone. "Miss Calloway." One of them said, polite, but without a trace of warmth. "We're here on behalf of someone who wants to speak with you." Wren didn't lower the axe. "Who?" They didn't answer directly. Instead, one man opened the rear of the SUV, took out a black leather briefcase, and set it on the wooden table on the porch. When he flipped it open, Wren drew in a sharp breath. Money. A lot of money. Neat stacks of bills packed so thick she couldn't begin to count them. $1 million, the man said, as calmly as if he were giving the weather report. "For you to disappear from Finnegan Blackwood's life." Wren stood there, stunned, unable to speak. The second man stepped closer, his voice gentler, but each word cut like a knife. "You're just a nurse, Miss Calloway. Do you really think you deserve him? He's the head of one of the most powerful families in America. He'll marry Priscilla Montgomery, the daughter of an equal family. That is his world. Lavish parties, million-dollar deals, power games. You don't belong there." He paused and let his gaze drift over the worn cabin, the look on his face filled with pity. "You live here alone in a wooden house in the forest. You have no family, no money, nothing. He stayed here for 3 months because he was injured, because he had amnesia, because he had no other choice. But now he's back in his world. Do you really think he'll come back here? Back to you, When he could have anyone. Those words pricked Wren's heart like needles. For a heartbeat, she wavered. Maybe they were right. She was only a nurse, an orphan living quietly in a battered cabin. Finn was the boss of an empire. A man who could have anything in the world. She'd seen Priscilla Montgomery's photo online. Perfectly beautiful, elegant, born to stand beside men like Finn. And what did Wren have? She looked down at the cash inside the briefcase. $1 million. Enough to live for the rest of her life without worry. Enough to buy a new home, to start over, to forget everything. Maybe she should let go. Maybe the past 3 months had been a dream, and it was time to wake up. But then, like light cutting through darkness, memories rushed in, Finn's searching hands on her face in the night, his voice whispering in wonder that she was beautiful, his arms around her when she cried, his voice telling her she wasn't alone anymore, the kiss in candlelight, trembling and true, and what he'd said beneath the stars, that she was his home. Finn hadn't loved her because of who she was in society. He'd loved her when he had nothing, no name, no sight, no past, no power. He'd loved her when he was only a man lost in darkness, and she was the only light guiding him through it. That kind of love couldn't be bought. Wren lifted her head, her eyes bright with a determination she hadn't known she had. She closed the briefcase and pushed it back toward the men. "I don't need your money," she said, her voice steady, "and love doesn't have a price. Go. Tell whoever sent you that I'm not for sale." The 2 men exchanged a look, surprise flickering across their hard faces. They weren't used to being refused. One of them grabbed the briefcase, snapped it shut, and they turned back toward the SUV. But before he got in, one man looked back, his gaze cold as ice. "You'll regret this decision." The black SUV rolled away and disappeared behind the trees, and Wren stood there, her heart pounding like a drum. When the vehicle was completely gone, she rushed inside, grabbed her phone, and dialed the number Finn had left her before he went. Only an endless ringing answered. The number was no longer active. She understood immediately. Finn was being cut off. Someone was severing every line between them. Wren wasn't the kind of woman who sat still and waited to die. She drove down to town, bought extra locks for the doors, bought a folding knife, and packed an emergency bag with clothes, cash, and her papers. That night, she set the axe beside the bed and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She knew they'd come back. And next time, they wouldn't come offering money. 3 days after turning down $1 million, Wren knew they'd come back. She'd prepared, she'd stayed alert, she'd kept the axe beside the bed and the folding knife under her pillow. But she didn't expect them to come so quickly. And she didn't expect that on that fateful night, she'd fall asleep anyway. At 2 a.m, a faint sound woke her. A soft scraping at the window, like someone was picking at a lock. Wren jolted upright, reaching for the axe, her heart pounding like a war drum. But she was a beat too slow. Before her fingers could close around the handle, darkness crashed down from behind. A large hand clamped over her mouth, and a cloth soaked in chemicals pressed hard to her nose. A sweet, nauseating smell flooded her lungs. Wren fought, her nails raking the air, her legs kicking wild. But the attacker's strength was overwhelming. The cabin spun around her, the moonlight at the window smearing into meaningless streaks. And then darkness swallowed everything. When Wren came to, she wasn't in the cabin anymore. Her head felt like it was being split with a hammer. Her mouth was dry and bitter, and when she tried to move, she realized her hands were bound tight to a wooden chair, rope biting into her wrists until red marks rose beneath the skin. Her ankles were tied to the chair legs too, leaving her completely helpless. The room was dark and cold, with no windows, only a single ceiling bulb pouring a sickly yellow light down, gray concrete walls, cement floor, no furniture except the chair she was trapped in. And in front of her, on a tripod, a camera blinked a red light. It was recording. A metal door opened with a long creak, and a man stepped in. Wren recognized him instantly, even though she'd never met him face to face. A face like Finn's, but stripped of warmth, eyes the same color but far colder, and a smile that carried a smugness so sharp it turned her stomach. Derek Blackwood. "Sorry for the inconvenience, Miss Calloway," Derek said, his voice politely staged. "I hope my men weren't too rough. They can be a little enthusiastic when they work." Wren didn't answer. She only stared straight into Derek's eyes, defiance bright in her gaze, even with her limbs bound. She wouldn't give him fear. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Derek dragged another chair over, set it in front of her, and sat down. He rested his chin on his hand, studying her the way someone might study an insect pinned to a display board. "Do you know who Finn is?" Derek asked, his tone light, like casual conversation. Do you really know? Or do you only know the version he wanted you to see? Wren stayed silent. How much did he tell you? Derek continued, tilting his head. Did he tell you about the people he's dealt with? The rivals who disappeared without a trace? About how the Blackwood family built this empire, with blood and tears from how many lives? Finn isn't the saint you think he is, Miss Calloway. He's just better at acting than I am. The silence stretched on, and Wren caught a flicker of irritation crossing Derek's face. He wasn't used to being ignored. Do you think he loves you? Derek gave a short, contemptuous laugh. Don't be naive. You were entertainment while he was trapped in that cabin. A small-town nurse who saved him when he was weak, blind, and empty of memory. He's grateful to you, that's all. He confused gratitude with love, and you were too lonely to notice the difference. That was when Wren spoke, her voice calm in a way that surprised even her. I know who he is. I know everything. She paused, holding Derek's gaze. And I know what you are. A traitor. A man who tried to kill his own brother to steal power. A man who shoved his car over a cliff and went home to pretend he was grieving. Derek sprang up so fast his chair toppled backward with a loud crash. His face changed, the smug smile vanishing, replaced by a surge of rage. For a heartbeat, Wren saw the real monster behind the polished mask. Then Derek pulled himself under control, drew a slow breath, and the smile returned. Only now it looked far more dangerous. You're brave, he said, his voice cold as ice. I like that, but bravery won't save you. Derek walked to the camera and adjusted the angle so Wren's face filled the frame. Then he hit record and began to speak, clear and slow. Dear Finn, as you can see, I've got a very special guest here. She's very pretty and very brave. I'll give her that. Derek smiled into the lens. You've got 48 hours. Announce that you're stepping down as head of the family. Leave Seattle, and let me take control of everything. If you do it, she'll be released back to her lovely little cabin without a single hair missing. But if you don't, or if you try anything stupid. Derek paused and turned his head toward Wren with a look of staged pity. She'll disappear. Permanently. And you'll never find her. He turned the camera off, faced Wren again, and spoke as if saying goodbye to an old acquaintance. Pray he loves you enough to give up everything. Then Derek left the room, the metal door slamming shut with a heavy echo, and Wren was alone in the dark. She didn't cry. Tears wouldn't help her now. Instead, she studied the room, memorizing every detail. The camera and whether it was still running, the kind of knot in the rope, which way the door opened, how many footsteps passed outside, and how often. Wren had grown up in shelters, had learned to take care of herself while she was still a child, had faced worse things than this. She wasn't going to sit here and wait for someone to save her. She was going to find her own way out. At the Blackwood estate, Finn was sitting in his office when Sully walked in, the loyal bodyguard's face unusually pale. Boss, there's a video. From Derek. Finn took the phone, and when the video began to play, his world collapsed. Wren was there, wrists bound to a chair, brown hair in disarray, but her eyes still held that bright defiance, even with her life hanging by a thread. Derek's voice came from behind the camera, cold and smug, reading the conditions like he was reciting the terms of a business contract. 48 hours. Step down. Leave Seattle. Or she would disappear forever. Sully stood nearby, watching his boss, and he saw something that in 10 years of serving Finnegan Blackwood, he had never seen. Finn's hands were shaking, not shaking with anger, not shaking with the urge to kill someone, shaking with fear. Real fear. The kind that only shows up when you're staring straight at the possibility of losing the most precious thing in your life. Finn's eyes didn't leave the screen. He stared at Wren's face, and Sully understood that this woman wasn't only someone Finn loved, she was everything he had. The video ended, and for a moment the air turned thick enough to choke on. Then Finn shot to his feet, and his fist slammed into the oak desk with terrifying force. Wood cracked, objects rattled and fell, and his roar filled the room. He touched her. He dared to touch her. Sully didn't flinch. He'd been beside Finn long enough to know what his boss needed right now. Finn, we need to stay calm. Derek wants you out of control. He wants you to do something stupid. Don't give him what he wants. Finn stood there, chest heaving, eyes still burning with rage. But slowly, he drew one deep breath, then another. And Sully watched the Blackwood boss return. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Call everyone, Finn said, his voice calm in a way that was almost frightening. Every source, every connection, everything we've got. Find her, no matter the cost. Then he raised the phone and typed a message to Derek. I need time to arrange things. Give me 24 hours. Across the city, Derek read the message and smiled a winner's smile. His brother had bent. Love made people weak, and Finn had proved it. Derek agreed to the extra time because he believed he'd already won. He didn't know it would be the biggest mistake of his life. While Finn and his men were tearing the city apart, Wren wasn't sitting in that locked room waiting for someone to rescue her. She watched. She listened. She remembered. There were 3 guards, rotating shifts every 6 hours. 2 of them were hardened men, eyes like stone, silent as they passed her door. But the third was different. He was young, around 25, with a baby-faced look and eyes that weren't used to violence. Every time he brought her food, he avoided her gaze. When he set the tray down, his hands trembled slightly, and when he walked away, his shoulders drooped as if he were carrying an invisible weight. Wren recognized it instantly. This was her weakness to work with. The next time he came in, Wren spoke. You don't want to do this, do you? He froze, back still turned to her, hand on the empty tray. Silence. I can see the way you look at me, Wren continued, her voice gentle, not threatening, just human. Or rather, the way you try not to look at me. You're not this kind of person. He didn't turn, but he didn't move either. Do you think kidnapping a woman is right? Wren asked. Do you have a mother, a sister? If someone did this to them, how would you feel? His shoulders sank further, and Wren knew she'd hit the right place. Then he walked out quickly, like he was running from his own conscience. The door shut, but Wren didn't lose heart. She'd planted the seed. Now she only had to wait for it to take root. That night, in the cold room with no windows, Wren sat in darkness and thought about Finn. She didn't know where he was, what he was doing, whether he even knew she'd been taken. But she believed in him. She believed he would find her. And while she waited, she would find her own way out. She wouldn't let herself become a piece on Derek's board. In 2 different parts of the city, 2 people were moving toward each other. Finn was turning over every stone to find her, and Wren was slowly breaking the defenses from the inside. Who would reach the finish line first? And would they have enough time before the 48 hours ran out? Sully walked into Finn's office carrying a briefcase stuffed with documents, and the look of a man who'd just struck gold. Boss, I've got everything we need. He spilled it all across the desk, and Finn looked down, his heartbeat quickening with every page he turned. First came a clip from a dash camera on a truck that had driven that mountain road that night, the night Finn almost died. The footage wasn't perfectly clear, but it was clear enough to show Finn's car being crowded by another SUV, pushed inch by inch toward the drop, until it finally went down into the darkness. The SUV's license plate was enlarged, and Sully had traced it back to one of Derek's closest men. Next came the financial records. Derek had been skimming family money for the past 2 years, small amounts at a time, careful enough that no one noticed, but added together it reached millions of dollars. The money had been routed into offshore accounts under false names Sully had worked hard to untangle. And finally, worst of all, there was proof that Derek had been selling Blackwood insider information to their rivals, deals that had mysteriously collapsed, plans that had been exposed before they could be executed. All of it traced back to Derek. He hadn't only wanted Finn dead. He'd betrayed the family a long time ago. Finn stared at the pile in front of him, and he knew what had to come next. The hardest part wasn't facing Derek. It was telling his mother the truth. Constance Blackwood was sitting in her private room when Finn walked in. She'd aged in the months she'd believed her eldest son was gone. Deeper lines in her face, more silver in her hair, and a sadness in her eyes that never fully left. When she saw Finn, she smiled, but the smile faded when she took in the gravity on his face. "Mother, I need you to look at something," Finn said, his voice gentle but heavy. "And I need you to be strong." She took the tablet from his hand, and as the video began to play, her face slowly drained of color. She watched Finn's car being forced over the cliff. She read the embezzlement records stamped and signed by Derek. She saw the messages Derek had sent to his men, ordering them to handle his brother cleanly. Every page, every line, landed like a knife in her chest. When it was over, Constance sank into her chair, hands trembling as she covered her face, and a choked sob broke from her throat. "My son wanted to kill my son." Finn stood there and watched his mother cry, and for the first time in his life, he saw her like this. Constance Blackwood had always been a woman of steel, the woman who'd stood beside her husband as they built this empire. the woman who'd buried her husband without shedding a single tear in front of anyone. But now she was crying, not only from grief, but from betrayal by the child she had carried, raised, and loved for 32 years. She reached for Finn's hand and clutched it hard. "I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I trusted the wrong person. I let Derek stay close while he was trying to destroy you. It isn't your fault," Finn said, kneeling beside her. "He's good at pretending. He's been performing his whole life. But now I need you on my side. I need your support in front of the family." Constance was quiet for a long time. Then she wiped her tears, rose to her feet, and when she looked at Finn, her eyes had turned cold as ice. This was no longer a grieving mother. This was the lady of the Blackwood family. "Derek is no longer my son," she said, her voice steady. "Do what you have to do." Meanwhile, in the dark holding room, Wren was still fighting in her own way. Nate, the young guard, came in and set down a bottle of water, and as always, he avoided her eyes. But this time, Wren didn't let him leave so easily. "Do you know how this ends?" she asked, her voice calm. "Derek will lose. He's playing a game he can't win, and when he loses, everyone who helped him will be dragged down with him." Nate stopped with his back still turned. "You don't know anything." "I know Finn Blackwood," Wren said. "I know what kind of man he is. He'll come. And when he comes, he won't forgive the people who kept me here." The silence stretched, heavy. "But if you help me," Wren continued, her voice softening, "I'll make sure you're protected. Finn keeps his word. He won't hurt someone who helped me." Nate turned and looked at her for a long moment. In his eyes, Wren saw conflict, fear, and a small, fragile spark of hope. Then he left without a word, the door closing behind him. But that night, when Wren tested the door, she realized it wasn't latched the way it usually was. One hard shove would be enough to open it. Wren smiled in the dark. The seed had taken root. At the Blackwood estate, Finn stood at the window looking out over the city. His men were ready. His mother was on his side. And Sully had just confirmed the location where Wren was being held. Everything was in place. The final storm was about to break. At first light the next morning, Finn's convoy stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle. Sully had tracked the location from the clues his team had collected, and everything fit together like the last pieces of a picture sliding into place. Finn stepped out of the vehicle, his gaze sweeping the crumbling building, and inside his chest his heart was pounding as if it wanted to break through bone. She was in there. She had to be in there. Finn's men moved in silence, spreading out like shadows under the pale dawn. They breached the entrance and poured inside, weapons raised, ready for anything. But when they reached the holding room Sully had identified, the metal door was wide open, and the space inside was empty. Only a wooden chair remained, with cut ropes lying on the floor beside it. Sully scanned the room, his brow tightening. She got out. Before Finn could answer, footsteps echoed from the far end of the hallway. He whipped around, his hand already at the gun on his hip, and then he froze. Wren was walking toward him, hair wild, face exhausted, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw him. Beside her was Nate, the young guard, moving with a look that was part fear and part relief. She had gotten herself out. Finn didn't think. He ran to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it was as if she might vanish if he let go. He felt her body shaking against his, felt her warm breath at his ear, and for the first time in 48 hours of hell, he could breathe. "I'm sorry," Finn whispered, his voice thick. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this world. I'm sorry I didn't protect you." Wren held him back, her arms tightening around him. "I chose you," she said, her voice steady even with tears shining in her eyes. "And I'll choose you, every single time." Finn pulled back and looked into her eyes, and what he saw there wasn't blame, and wasn't fear, only love. Then he turned to Nate, who stood awkwardly nearby, not knowing what would happen to him. Finn stepped closer, and Nate went rigid, bracing for the worst. But instead of punishment, Finn only gave a short nod. "Thank you. You saved the most important person in my life. You'll be protected. I promise." Nate let out a breath as if he'd just been spared. And maybe he had. That afternoon, at the Blackwood estate, Finn called an emergency meeting with every senior member of the family. The large conference room filled with familiar faces, people who'd served the Blackwood name for generations. They didn't know why they'd been summoned, but the tension in the air made it clear this wasn't an ordinary gathering. Derek walked in, confident as ever, that familiar smile on his lips. He didn't know Wren had been rescued. He didn't know his plan had collapsed. He believed he was still in control. But when he saw Wren standing beside Finn at the front of the room, the smile froze on his mouth, and the color drained from his face. Finn didn't give him time to recover. "Today, I have something to share with all of you," Finn began, his voice carrying through the room. "About my brother, Derek Blackwood." The large screen behind Finn lit up, and piece by piece, the evidence was laid bare for everyone to see. The dash camera footage showing Finn's car being forced over the cliff, the financial documents proving Derek had stolen millions of dollars, the messages ordering his men to carry out the ambush, proof he'd sold inside information to rivals, and finally, the video of Wren held captive, Derek's threats ringing out clearly. The room went dead silent. Every gaze turned toward Derek, and in those eyes was horror, disgust, and fury. Derek shot to his feet, his face flushed hot. "This is fabricated. You're trying to bring me down. You're making it up to keep your power." But before he could say more, Constance Blackwood stood. She stepped into the center of the room, her eyes cold as ice as she stared at the youngest son she'd carried and raised. "Derek Blackwood," she said, her voice cutting through the deadly hush. "From today on, you are no longer my son. You are no longer a member of the Blackwood family. You are nothing." The words landed like a final sentence. No one in the room dared defend Derek. No one dared meet his eyes. He had lost, completely and absolutely. Finn walked up to his brother and stopped in front of him, face to face with the man who'd tried to kill him, the man who'd kidnapped the woman he loved, the man who'd betrayed the family. "You wanted me dead," Finn said, his voice calm in a way that was terrifying. "But I'm not going to kill you." Derek lifted his head, shock and suspicion in his eyes. "Death is too easy," Finn continued. "You're going to live with no money, no power, no family, no one. You're going to live and remember what you used to have. You're going to live and know you destroyed it with your own hands." Derek was escorted out by 2 men, stripped of his phone, his wallet, everything that belonged to the Blackwood name. He was cast out with nothing but the clothes on his back and a burning hatred in his eyes. As he was shoved through the door, he turned back to look at Finn one last time, his gaze loaded with curses. But he'd lost, and he would have to live with that loss for the rest of his life. When the door shut behind Derek, Finn turned to Wren and took her hand. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time in months, he could see a future for them that wasn't covered in darkness. "It's done," he said, relief loosening his voice. "Let's go home." In the weeks after Derek was cast out, the Blackwood family stepped into a new era. Finn stood before everyone who remained and announced what many had feared for a long time. The Blackwood family would move fully onto a legal path. Every gray operation would be shut down. Every tie to the underworld would be cut. This would no longer be a shadow empire. This would be a real business organization, built on integrity instead of fear. Many objected. They were used to the old way, used to easy money, used to the kind of power that came from violence. Finn didn't try to hold them. He opened the door and let them leave if they wanted to. "I'd rather have fewer people who are loyal than a crowd that stays only for money," he said. "Those who stay will build the future with me. Those who leave, I wish them luck." Constance stood beside her son through that turbulent transition, and she opened her arms to Wren as a true member of the family. The first time she met Wren after everything that had happened, she took the young woman's hand and spoke in a voice trembling with emotion. "You gave me my son back. You loved him when he had nothing, when he didn't even know who he was. That's real love. Your family, Wren, from now on and forever." 2 months later, Finn took Wren back to the cabin in the pine woods where it had all begun. Winter had come, and in a strange, almost miraculous echo, a gentle storm was moving outside, wind whistling through the cracks, rain tapping the roof like a familiar song from that fateful night more than a year earlier. Inside the cabin, the fireplace burned warm, candles glowed around the room, and Wren stood in the middle of the small space, not understanding why Finn had brought her here tonight. Then Finn dropped to one knee in front of her. In his hand was a small black velvet box, and when he opened it, inside was a simple diamond ring, not the wolf ring of the Blackwood family, but something entirely new, a symbol of a new beginning. "You were my light when I couldn't see," Finn said, his voice trembling with feeling. "You were my home when I didn't know who I was. You loved me when I had nothing but darkness and nightmares. Wren, be my wife, be my light for the rest of my life." Tears spilled down Wren's cheeks, but they were tears of happiness. She nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat, And when Finn slipped the ring onto her finger, they both knew they'd found what they'd been searching for all their lives. Their wedding wasn't a lavish event with hundreds of guests the way people would have expected from the Blackwood boss. Instead, it was a small, intimate ceremony with only the closest people, held right there at the cabin where they'd met. In his vows, Finn said, "I used to think power was everything. I used to believe money and status defined a person. Then I lost it all. My sight, my memory, my identity, everything I'd been proud of. And in that darkness, I found you, the only thing that truly mattered. I promise I'll love you every day. I'll look at you each morning with endless gratitude, and I'll build a new life with you, a life worth living." Wren took Finn's hand, looked into his eyes, and spoke her vows. "I used to think I'd be alone forever. I used to believe I didn't deserve love, that I didn't belong anywhere. Then the storm brought you to me. You gave me family. You gave me the feeling of belonging somewhere. I promise I'll be your home, whether it's in this small cabin or in a grand estate, whether in darkness or in light, whether poor or rich, whether in storms or in peace." A year after the wedding, their lives had changed completely. Wren opened a free clinic for the poor who didn't have health insurance, using her nursing skills to help the less fortunate. Finn found a new kind of meaning in giving back, creating a charitable foundation to support orphans, children like Wren had once been, so they could have a chance to be loved and to have a real home. And every winter, they returned to the cabin where it all began. Tonight was the same, a winter night with a storm like so many others. Like the first night more than a year ago when Wren found a stranger unconscious in the rain. They sat by the fireplace, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside the window, and Finn pulled Wren into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. "Thank you," he whispered against her ear. "Thank you for finding me that night. Thank you for not running when you learned who I was. Thank you for giving me the chance to be loved the right way." Wren rested her head on his shoulder and smiled. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for choosing me, even though you could have had anyone in this world." Outside, the storm still roared. Inside, the fire burned warm, and two people who had once been lost, once been wounded, once not believed in love, had now found home in each other's arms. In the deepest darkness, sometimes you find the brightest light, and real love doesn't need to know who you are, doesn't care whether you're rich or poor, powerful or ordinary. Love only needs to know one thing, that you choose to stay, no matter how the world turns. The story of Wren and Finn teaches us that everyone deserves to be loved, no matter how dark their past may be. It reminds us that sometimes the best things come from the hardest circumstances, and most of all, it shows us that love has the power to heal every wound, to change a person, and to turn darkness into light. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this story. If it touched your heart, please hit the like button and share this video with the people you love. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss touching stories every day. We'd truly love to know how you feel about this story. Have you ever lived through a moment when you felt as lost as Wren or Finn? Do you believe love can change a person? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We're eager to hear what's in your heart. Finally, we wish all of you watching this video good health, a happy life, and peace each day. Keep believing in love and never give up hope, because sometimes miracles come from the places you least expect. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.